Welcome back. Today we're looking at some of my fastest checkmates on chess.com. That's because on chess.com there are collections. You can go to one of the menu items, at least on the PC, probably not in the app. Go to play and library, and then you can create what's called collections and add your games to them. And so over time I've been adding what I believe are my fastest or my best wins. So it was very easy for me to find these fastest checkmates, or least amount of moves to checkmate. On Lichess, it's, at least to my knowledge, much more difficult to find those. Regardless, I hope you'll enjoy these. I'm going to move quickly. This first one was not too difficult. I opened with the king pawn, got the normal response. You're seeing the accuracy on the board already up over on the right, where it says I have 97% accuracy and my opponent has 3% accuracy. Honestly, I believe those numbers are a little exaggerated. Both mine a little high and the opponent's a little low. But in this case, I played the normal knight move. I got an unusual response. I wasn't sure what to do with that d6 move. So I just kept developing normally. My opponent pinned my knight. I continued to develop normally. They took my knight. Now, normally, at least in my understanding, the whole point of this is to damage the pawn structure. That's the point of that sacrifice. That means you need to wait. That means the bishop needs to wait there until this queen is somewhere else. Or until something else is going on, perhaps. Perhaps you've gotten a knight in here that also guards this square, or something. That way you can make the double trade and still end up damaging white's pawn structure. The point, I don't believe, is to make that trade now. But they did, which put my queen right here, pointed right there. And as soon as I made that trade, I saw this, and I said to myself, well, they'll immediately move that pawn forward or put the queen right here, perhaps made the knight out here to guard this very vulnerable king pawn. And they did. And I thought, oh, wait, if that's the choice, I can remove that knight fairly easily by opening this diagonal, which I did. And as you can see, my opponent had no idea that this diagonal had just been opened, the point of which was to remove the defender of this very weak square, where I have been watching this whole time. The knight move that they made instead was a normal development move. But at this point, we're not normally developing anymore because they've, by that bishop trade earlier, forced my queen to come to this square. It's a common blunder. They lost sight of where my queen and light squared bishop are pointing. So I took the knight. No, there's nothing defending this square anymore. And at that point, they definitely should not have taken my bishop because now there's nothing guarding the square. At that point, they had to put this here, block the bishop, do something, because as soon as that bishop was gone, that's checkmate. It was over. If I'm not mistaken, that was 8 moves. Yes, 8 moves. Okay, my next one, I'll be honest, that was a mouse slip. I think this is called the English opening. I'm not familiar with that. I obviously began with, like everyone else, with the king pawn opening, and then later have been transitioning into queen pawn opening, trying to learn Queen's Gambit or the London system. The London system seems a little simpler to me than the Queen's Gambit, so I've been trying the London system, but that's what I meant to move. I thought I had clicked this pawn and clicked that square, but I moved my c pawn by mistake. That probably threw my opponent off. I don't know if they had faced the is it the English? I think this is called the English opening. Not sure. I don't know if they'd faced that before, but I saw it as kind of if I were playing black and moved that pawn, then one of my next moves would be to put the bishop behind it. I had tried to play the Sicilian before, so that's why I put the knight there. Regardless, they developed normally. I tried to. We got 4 knights out. I opened a line for a bishop to protect this weak pawn. I'm not sure what that was all about. I decided, I'm not sure what I was deciding here, to be honest. Why, I don't know why I moved the queen. Maybe just going on this open diagonal. I don't know. They castled. Well, I immediately thought, wait, they've trapped their queen, their king. This pawn is vulnerable. My queen is already pointing at it. So I should make that. Yes, the knight guards that square, but I already have a target, is my point. I can move a knight here to aim at this corner pawn. I can get a bishop out. But I wanted to remove that knight from this square, so I put my knight up here, where it is protected. And they didn't do anything. So now I'm very close to checkmate. The computer says we're even at this point, but then they blundered. And you see the valuation bar shoot up to the top, mate in one. I honestly at that point was surprised. I thought that the reason they didn't take, when I first put the knight up there, was because they saw this and they realized they needed to keep their knight in place. But then when I did this and they moved that knight, I took it. Checkmate. Also in 8 moves, on my 8th move. That was an opponent that was rated fairly close to me. We were both within shouting distance of 1200 on chess.com. Now, this last one is my fastest checkmate that I could find. And it was against an opponent rated higher than me. As you can see from the evaluations here, we were very close to one another. It looks like we had 0 inaccuracies, 0 mistakes, and they only had 1 blunder, which was their final move. This is when I was transitioning into the queen pawn openings. Pardon me. And they were trying what, if I'm not mistaken, is called the Dutch defense. I have seen some studies on this where even though these 2 king pawns get out of the way, once you have the bishop and the knight in place and the king is castled, it apparently is stable. I've been told that Magnus Carlsen and other high-ranking chess players play this Dutch defense. So my only thought here was perhaps my opponent is trying the Dutch defense for the first time. Again, I was thinking one of these 2 moves was going to be next, either the knight out or the pawn up. Either way, my bishop's in a fairly good place. If the knight comes out, I figured I would just trade right then before anything else could happen, because that would damage their structure. So that was my idea. They didn't move the knight out. They did probably what's the smarter move. But already, I'm seeing that there's an open diagonal here. These pawns and bishop kind of outline this diagonal, which I can get to really quickly, is what I started noticing right here. So instead of just pulling my bishop back or even further to relative safety, I pushed it here thinking, what if I was able to draw this pawn all the way out? Because they've already negated their own original idea of a Dutch defense by moving this pawn. Now the only thing stopping this checkmate is this pawn, which wouldn't be guarded by anything. But I obviously do not want it here when I move my queen. So I thought if I move my bishop back, perhaps I could draw this pawn out. And that's exactly what they did. So my queen can't get there right now, obviously. To make that happen, I pushed this pawn. The idea is that they see 2 easy captures, free pieces. Nothing's guarding this pawn. Nothing's guarding this bishop. They spent all this time chasing the bishop all the way up here with these pawn moves. The idea is if they do either one of those, checkmate. And they did one of them, so I checkmated them. And that was move 5. So, and again, this was a person rated higher than me, 1,231, and I was at the time rated just right at 1,200, and winning this game bumped me up to 1,215, I believe. Anyway, those are my 3 fastest checkmates that I could find. 8 moves, 8 moves, and 5 moves. This last one, well, really, all 3 of them depended on the opponent blundering, making an obvious mistake, perhaps in a hurry, perhaps distracted, perhaps not seeing my plan. Here again, this is, I think what they have to do right here is this, if I'm not mistaken. I believe once I've opened my diagonal for the queen, that's got to be their only saving grace, so that when I do the check, their queen can get out. And then I can save my bishop, perhaps, or take this pawn. I'm not sure what the plan is at that point. Because if they did move that pawn, then my bishop's trapped. Because I bring it back, my bishop has nowhere to go. So at that point, I would have to take the pawn and I guess take this bishop. I don't know. I probably would have been trapped. The fact was that they blundered right there at that point, and the game was over. So at least I don't expect wins like this. I just prepare for them. I get ready for them just in case I see something that looks like right here. I see that this diagonal is open, and I see that there's only one piece preventing me from getting there. Then I start preparing. Yes, I'm still looking at other things. I'm still looking at this or this, even normal knight moves. I'm possibly thinking of even getting the c pawn up so I can move my bishop back. But now I'm seeing that, wow, if they get really distracted by this bishop, I can win. And now I give them a second distraction. They're thinking now is, do I take the pawn? Do I take the bishop? What's better for me? And they took their time and made a decision. The bishop's obviously more important. Opens up an eventual file for their rook. I no longer have a bishop. And by virtue of those 2 distractions, they completely didn't see what I was thinking. But again, you can't plan on them making a blunder, but you can be ready just in case they do. That's the idea. Thank you for watching.